Boy, I'm seeing some footage coming out of Australia from yesterday from a protest in which apparently uh, 10 police were injured and 7 were sent to the hospital, and 285 innocent, normal people who just want to live their lives were rounded up and arrested. Now, I'm not someone who ever thinks that politics should be brought into, personal relationships, typically, where people disagree. I think that it's terrible that, in this country there are, families and, friendships that were broken over the 2020 election. I just think that's so stupid because for the most part in this country, elections aren't that important. But in Australia, uh, I would take if I were in Australia, I would take a very different tact. Things are so bad in Australia. Um, if if you know people who are going along with what's happening there, with this level of authoritarianism, you can't you can't in good conscience break bread with them. If you, for example, if you have a relative and you're in Australia who's a police officer, I would not be able to look them in the face, at least without spitting. I would be so ashamed to be related to that person. If I had a neighbor who was a police officer, I would never speak to them. I would not look at them. I would never let them in my house, certainly, but then again, under normal circumstances, if I knew someone was a cop, I don't think I'd let them in my house. But the Australian police have proved that they have no breaking point. They have no moral compass. Uh, they have no standards. They have no respect for their fellow man. They are just blatant thugs. They're no different, or they're no better than your common MS-13 street gangster. It's a common trope amongst, I guess you would say, people of the Rothbardian persuasion that government, is just an organized crime ring. But within the realm of organized crime, there are different tiers. You've got your old school Italian mobsters like from Goodfellas or The Godfather, who you generally think of being as more civilized than a Mexican drug cartel. And most governments kind of fall into that more Italian mobster kind of realm, to where they're human beings who you could deal with, even if they are going to shake you down and steal your money. But police in Australia are not in that category. They are rabid animals. They have there is no lengths at which at this point they would not go to, and the people who support them, who enable them, who allow them to exist in the community, also need to be punished as well. The only way I think that things could ever turn around in Australia, it would have to happen in small pockets and in communities, isolated communities that don't support these measures, where there's a majority of people who don't believe in this, who do believe in just living a normal life. I won't even say, who believe in freedom. You don't have to believe in freedom to believe that, we should have more freedom than the folks in Australia do right now. But in those small isolated communities, and frankly, even if you live outside of them, even if you're in a big city, I think it is imperative that, in your business, you just don't serve police officers. There needs to be some social cost, because you're not gonna win in a fist fight with the cops. There's not enough good people in Australia to fight all the cops, sadly. But if the police do incur some kind of cost for their jobs, if they could lose respect in the community, if they could lose access to to certain stores, certain restaurants. Well, actually, I don't even know if they have restaurants in Australia anymore. I don't know what kind of stores they have. But just generally speaking, you should treat them the way that they treat other people, and that is as subhuman. Treat them like the animals that they are. Treat them the way that they would treat you. Actually, I can't even say that. That's going too far, because as I've said, the Australian police brutalize innocent people, and if you treated a police officer that way, you would be dead. You would be worse than in the gulag. They'd put a bullet in your brain, or, well, I don't know if they carry guns, cops in Australia. They may be like the UK where they have billy clubs, but they'll bash your head in, and you will be dead. And so the only way that this is ever going to change is if the social cost of being one of these tyrannical, jackbooted Gestapo thugs rises, and it becomes difficult as an Australian to be a cop. They need to be uncomfortable. They need to feel like there's always people looking at them when they're in uniform who have nothing but contempt for them. Police in Australia need to feel more like cops in America are made to feel in the inner cities. But the problem, of course, is that right now in Australia, you've got 99% of the population with a back-the-blue, brain-dead attitude. And no matter how many times they see a cop bash somebody's head in or choke them out, just for the crime of walking down the street without one of the 5 approved reasons that you have, that the government gives you to leave your house, even after all that, there's still so many people in Australia who back the blue. Now, if the few who don't, would make their voices heard, and try and step up and try to be unkind to police officers, stop short of getting yourself thrown in prison, but, do whatever you can. And if they're your family, that includes things, well, not that they have Thanksgiving in Australia, but if you did, don't invite them to Thanksgiving. Say, we have nothing but contempt for you. We disown you. You're a bad person. I don't want to see you unless you decide to be a good person. Give them a chance for redemption. You don't want people to think that they're irredeemable, because then they have no incentive to ever try and do better. Like Christmas. If your brother's a cop, don't invite him over. Don't call him on his birthday and say, "Hey, bro, how you doing?" These cops in Australia should be treated by their families the way that any reasonable family would treat a member of their family who has become who's joined a gang. You don't do that. If your son joins MS-13. You're not going to have the same relationship with him that you did when he was just a nice boy, on the baseball team, who, was dating a cheerleader. People can recognize when their family members have gone astray and have gone down a bad path. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't, that you have to hate them. You shouldn't do that. Hatred is the enemy. Hatred is what is driving your family members to do these terrible things, because they are told by their department, now, we have to hate, here's the enemy, you need to go and you need to take them down, and they're bad because they're lawbreakers. These cops in Australia have an absence of empathy, of compassion, of love for their fellow man. And so therefore, if I were a family member of one of these cops, I would look at them and say, if that's how you treat those people, what's to stop you from doing that to me? If you care so little about the average person, that you would brutalize them in such a way that you would haul them off and throw them in a gulag, then there's no way that you're capable of loving me. This is a serious issue. When you have institutionalized violence to such an extreme degree, it's not healthy for a society. People aren't meant to operate like that. People either operate in a state of cooperation or coercion, and when your society is that coerced, it's going to be put under a lot of tension, because you can't trust other people when they hurt you that way. You go from being a high trust society to a very low trust society. And so I think that this could start to change, that the tide could start to turn once the social costs of being a part of the regime, of being even a bureaucrat, but certainly a police officer, since they are the tip of the spear. They're the people who you should go after in this case. You're not going to affect the politicians, although they should be just as easily shunned. If you see a politician who supports this sorts of thing when you're out in public, don't literally spit in their face. But if they come to your store, refuse to serve them. You should tell them that you have nothing, that you and everyone has nothing but contempt for them, that they're going to go to hell or something like that. Come up with it. Think of something. And just make it very uncomfortable for them to be in public. Make them afraid to go outside not because they fear for their safety. You don't want to go that far, but make them be afraid of what people think of them and how people will talk to them. They deserve to feel grief at the very least. And for the politicians, maybe they're making a lot of money or whatever. Maybe they like their power. Maybe you're not going to change their mind. But for an ordinary cop, who I don't know how much a cop makes in Australia, but here in the U.S. they don't make a lot. And so, if it's a similar situation in Australia, if you make it to where, a police officer, every time he's out in the community, he's going to get a bunch of grief from his neighbors and from his fellow citizens, people telling him, you're disgusting, I hate you, you have no place here, get out of our community, you're a parasite, you're a pariah, then pretty soon a lot of those cops will say, you know what, my $26,000, US dollar I'm using here, salary, is not worth it. I'd rather go be a janitor or something. I'd rather go scrub toilets, because at least then, it's not fun work, but it's an honest, it's an honest day's work, and people won't hate me for it. They won't look at me as though I'm the scum of the earth. So, with that said, I guess I will see you folks back here tomorrow.